Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have your notes out. We're going to continue with the, yes, shell shock. Where we last left off, we were talking about one of the debilitating effects of this mechanized modern warfare is like pounding, 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 and corpses here, there, and everywhere, and it just like is very debilitating. It's a serious thing. And actually, ironically, because it was so prevalent during World War I, we know more about the effects that it has on people because they were trying to come up with like a cure, come up with a treatment, and they did learn things. Okay? So yeah, if you've got, everyone got your notes, no one's playing a game, right?
Correct.
Correct. You're doing notes. Yes. Yes. It makes me very happy. Shh. During times of difficulty, it makes me very happy when people are actually very focused on what it is that we're all taking risks in order to participate in. Me trying to help you educate for your benefit, for your life. You actually taking it seriously. Because have I ever been in a situation where I've had students who haven't been taking things seriously? Yeah, I mean, and it actually, it's sort of like, it's just a reminder to me that like, there's life choices. And if you have somebody in your life who is not taking things very seriously, I think at some point you sort of look and go, I'm going to move on from that. Right? So I don't think it's a good idea for students, particularly in this situation. I mean, it is kind of light, haha, and so forth, but I think it's a really bad choice to be like violating the trust of people who are taking chances to actually try and educate you by playing games while they're trying to educate you. I mean, I'm not pointing fingers, but there are some 11th graders. Yeah, Mia's pointing fingers at herself. Don't do it in here. I mean, seriously. It's like, don't do it. I mean, don't do it in other classes, but I can't be there. And I'm not going to take it. It's like, I just think that's stupid because, let me see, I mean, if you get into habits when you're young, they're harder to break when you get older. And so then you get into like work situations and you're like, wow, why did I get fired? I'm serious most of the time in my work. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on and on and give you guys another lecture because honestly, we don't have that much time. Shh. We don't have that much time. We learned a lot 100 years ago about pandemics. Oh yeah, that's right. We learned a lot about pandemics. Shh. And how actually distancing, Mia, helps to overcome, because they didn't have some of the same tools available during the Spanish influenza, and that killed millions of people. It killed more people worldwide than World War I did, which is crazy. Yeah, when you think about it, you're like, is that right? There were like more American men who were killed at training camps because they were exposed to Spanish influenza from other American men, young men. I mean, it really hit young, healthy people really hard. It was messed up. So anyway, shell shock. I'm going to continue showing that particular video because I think they've got some really helpful things. I think last time, did they show some of the treatment and so forth there? Okay, brace yourselves because, yeah, it's like, oh, let me see, what can we do to, like, cure you of shell shock? How about if we put electrodes on you and, like, zap you because you're going to see that. Yeah, and let's diagnose whether or not you have shell shock. Let me hold a French officer's cap in front of you. This is where I'm like, okay, you've proven your point. Now move the cap away. I feel for the guy because the guy is freaking out. He has got a... Yeah. It's like, don't mess with it. If somebody's got a mental condition and so forth, be kind, be generous, be helpful, help work toward a cure. What was the one thing I think we did identify last time? Haley, do you remember? What was one thing that they discovered actually started to help people with PTSD with shell shock? Psychotherapy, yeah. The talking cure is what they called it. The talking cure, kind of working it through. And it doesn't make it necessarily go completely all the way, but it does help. And of course, you know, pharmaceutical companies and doctors and pharmacists and so forth are going to be trying to find things that will help their, and of course you get into huge debates over how much reliance you have on, you know, chemicals in order to deal with things, but without getting into that, perhaps if it can kind of calm things down so that people can move forward, you know, there may be some benefit there. So let me show you that, and then we'll get back into the nature of the war. Okay? All right. Good. All right, so we got that queued up. No, you're not. Yeah, just
Shell shock represented a kind
5
of
minutes.
a personal withdrawal from an intolerable reality. Not all, or even most soldiers, suffered from shell shock, but those who did were sobering examples of what mechanized warfare could do to human beings. Rifleman Arthur Russell was, or had been, a magnificent specimen of manhood, 6 feet tall. There was not a mark on him, yet he was helpless as a child. When I returned about a month later, I found Russell trying to walk. His speech was slowly returning, a slow, halting speech full of stammers. But I doubt if he ever again became a fit man. The symptoms were often tied to an event on the battlefield. The soldier who bayoneted an enemy in the face developed a facial tic. This man responded to nothing, except the word bomb, which sent him scurrying under the bed. This French soldier became hysterical at the sight of an officer's red hat. Treatment for most enlisted men involved rest and recuperation.
There is some extraordinary material about the way in which we were incapable of acting. We're taught first to sew, then to weave, then to farm, and then to carry a gun, and then to shoot it again.
Wow.
As if they're moving from a kind of feminine recuperation to masculine combat status. You know, you can go back to the men's war.
The worst cases left doctors grasping for solutions. Electric shock treatment was applied to thousands. Some improved.
So,
Yeah.
For the rest, the pain of treatment only added to their misery. But this was not the only experimental method of treating shell shock.
We'll do a little bit of this. And then get some of the poetry.
Far from the Western Front, in a place where the grass was so green and trees still had leaves, doctors developed an innovative method of treating shell shock. The patients were often
For that time, yeah.
like Wilfred Owen.
Psychotherapy.
My own dear mother. We left Netley on Monday morning. I woke up as we were rounding the coast by Dunbar. The castle looked more than ever a hallucination with the morning sun behind it. A taxi brought me up here about 2.5 miles from the town. There is nothing very attractive about the place. It is far too full of officers, some of whom I know.
Owen's journey took him here, to the outskirts of Edinburgh, Scotland, to a place called Craiglockhart. In this former sanitarium, doctors attempted the emotional repair of British officers, using a technique only recently pioneered by Freud, psychotherapy. Others called it the talking cure. For Owen, it began to gradually take effect.
My dearest mother, last night I had a consultation with Dr. Brock from 11 till midnight. I still have disastrous dreams, but they are taking on a more civilian character. Motor accidents and so on. Nothing more to tell, I think. Ever your own, Wilfred.
It
Yeah.
that only
So instead of having bombs exploding in his dreams,
controversial soldiers say
he has
necessary.
car crashes and people flying through windshields. So I mean, that's that's an improvement, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, it's like, good point, good point. I mean, there's like a little bit of an irony there. And of course, put this down, because this is important to note, because as we go through history, and we're going to be getting out of World War I, ultimately, thank you very much, but into World War II. Write this down. You ready? Write this down. Austin, hello. Okay. World War II, people are going to be like, can we not have World War II? Could we not have another big war? Write this down. The fact that there were so many casualties, so much destruction, so much like damage done to men and women, but men particularly in the battlefield, and injuries and these PTSD, the shell shock and so forth, really drove home the point that, wow, war is not so much glorious in modern times. It's really, really bad. War became very unpopular, and particularly among the winners, like Britain and France. The British and French populations and the American population were like, can we not do that again? Which created an irony, because coming out of World War I, there's going to be some people, the winners, who really don't want to go to war again. But among some of the losers, among some of the population in Germany, there's a desire to turn things back, to get revenge and so forth. So you get this really difficult problem ultimately. You'll see this again. We're going to see this. I'm just sort of like telegraphing this for you that it's coming. Britain and France, among others, are going to try so hard not to have another big war. What's that going to mean? What do you have to do in order to not... Here, I'll ask you this one. Because Hitler sometimes is characterized as being a little bit of a tantrum child. I want my way. I want this territory. When he gets in charge of Germany, he's like, I want this territory to be part of Germany. I want this territory to be part of Germany. After all, those people speak German, and so they should be part of Germany. I want. How many of you guys have ever worked with a child who would not take no for an answer? And if they came close to hearing a no, they would break out into some form of a tantrum. Raise your hand if you've ever run into that. So what do? You're thinking, part of your thing is like... So, I mean, it's like, how many of you guys have tried this approach? Let them have what they want. And that, it doesn't work. Does it work in the short term?
Yeah.
In the short term, but not in the long... Haley, what do you mean? It doesn't work in the long term?
Well, for one thing, then they start wanting something again a few minutes later, and they start to come to expect that.
Yeah. So they're checking your boundaries, and if you don't create boundaries, they're going to like push, 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 push. Analogize that then, because, I mean, here's the thing. You don't want to have like a battle with that child. You're just like looking at the clock going, when is the parents coming? Unless they're your children, in which case you're like, I don't know. It creates a little bit more of a challenge. And then you're like, it's your issue. Yeah, you can't just pass it on to the parents. But this is, the analogy I think is relevant because Europe does not want to go into another big war. And they try so hard to avoid another big war that guess what they end up with? Yeah, World War II. Because Hitler's just going to push, push, push. And eventually they're going to learn. And eventually he's like, hey, I want those German-speaking areas of Poland. And they're like, no. We can't, no. Which is really sad, because is there going to be like death and destruction and devastation in World War II? Heck yeah. We'll get into all the details of all the battles and so forth of World War II. It's very, very interesting. You guys are going to be very learned in that, World War II. But I just want you to know, coming out of World War I, one of the things that sticks out is people hate the war. It was really, really disappointing. It wasn't glorious and a quick victory and happy parades. There was a lot of anti-war sentiment, particularly in the winning countries, and they tried everything they could to avoid war again. And could they? No, because the other side is going to be Hitler. He's just going to push, 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 push. let's talk about some of the innovations. All right, let's get back to, this is a nature of war, and this is kind of a combination of technological developments and tactics and strategy. Do you see the handout there? All right. And we've actually alluded to this already. The British Navy was very powerful, and they didn't want to have any country ship goods trade with Germany. So they put the blockade in, right? You got that? Okay. And we can see physically, literally, you'll have British war patrols going across from Scotland over to Norway, and then over here between neutral Norway and neutral, basically to cut off shipping coming in. Now, if you're a shipper, right, Mia, let's say that you're a shipping company, you're from, I don't know, like the United States, a neutral country, and you've established a trading relationship prior to World War I with Germany, a lot of money being made. Now the British basically tell you, sorry, you can't go through. Are you going to go ahead and send your ships through? Well, that was easy. Why not? Yeah, Britain's Navy is very powerful. What will they do? If their ship sees your ship coming through there, they will order you to stop. Okay? And their ships are pretty fast. They've got fast engines and so forth. They'll pull up right next to it. And if you don't stop, they'll fire on you. So if you're a company that wants money, you quickly, write this down, no longer do trade with Germany. We've already alluded to this earlier on. This is one of the things. We told you one of the reasons why Germany loses World War I is because they end up starving. They're starved of resources, food, and so forth. The British blockade is very, very effective. Now, Mia, we'll throw this out to you. If you're no longer doing a lot of trade with the German clients, could you make that up by finding new clients?
Yeah.
Who? Very good. Britain and France. Excellent. Write that down. American companies and South American, Central American, and other companies, they will trade increasingly with Britain and France. Germany gets lost out. Why? Because of the British blockade. Doesn't quite work out that way.
They have allies down
Well, on the German side, they got Russia on the other side, so that doesn't work so well. Otherwise, actually, Italy kind of gunks it up there a little bit too, because Italy switches fairly early on.
there. Oh, really?
Yeah, so that gunks it up there too. And then, of course, then you got Switzerland. Anyway, it's a nice idea, but the reality is most of the trade was coming into Germany by water, and now it's being blocked off. So the Germans are really upset because your company now is trading with with Britain. And so Germany's like, stop doing that. And you're like, you've got a decent navy, but I don't see you being able to carry out a massive German blockade of Britain and France. So what can the Germans do to gunk up the works as far as trade to Britain and France? Here's the answer. U-boats. Write it down. U-boats. U-boats. Submarines. This is kind of a technological advance because where the U-boat submarine development, you had some submarines in in the Civil War. They were very, very primitive. But these submarines are pretty cool. Here's the deal. It can go underwater, it can stay underwater, and the advantage of being underwater is you can't see where it is. Got it? It doesn't have a lot of armor like other Navy vessels, so if you find it and you see it and you can hit it, you'll sink it because its shell is not very powerful. So, can it pull up next to Mia's trading vessel and go, hey, turn around, don't go to Britain or France? They'll laugh at you, right? So what does it do? Instead of giving a warning to turn around, it fires a torpedo. Write it down. It fires a torpedo. Germany has warned countries not to trade to Britain and France, so they've got a whole bunch of these groups of submarines below the surface waiting for these trading vessels, merchant ships to come in, and when they see them, they sink them. Think about this, all right? If I'm a submarine commander, a U-boat commander, Untersee is the German name for it, underwater. If I'm a U-boat commander, do I want to get near some big Navy ship that has guns that as soon as they see me surface? Write this down, because before I can fire my torpedoes, I have to surface. And as soon as I surface, those naval vessels are looking. And as soon as they see me, they're going to be hitting me with guns. Mia's ships don't have guns.
Yeah, does it have a scope for
Well, yeah, and of course they're looking for the periscopes too. But they've got to get up just like right near the surface and so forth. It's dangerous work. I, as a sub-commander, want to stay away from Navy ships. I want to hit merchant ships, okay? And I hit them, and they sink. Eventually, write this down. Okay? Oh, and by the way, some of you guys are thinking, can't they detect the ships underwater, the U-boats underwater? What is that called, that detection, like that ping? Radar is for the sky.
Underwater radar.
It's called sonar. Thank you. It's like what dolphins use. Dolphins as opposed to bats. Bats use a radar thing. Dolphins use like a sonar thing. That's not developed until World War II. Okay? So basically, if Mia's still like, I'm going to make some money on this, here's what she does. Write this down. It's called convoys. Convoys. And typically what happens is a bunch of ships from like Canada, the United States, maybe even some South American ships, will collect at, say, Halifax, a Canadian port city. A whole bunch of them will collect and go over together, rather than just one or two at a time, which the German subs can, knock off bit by bit. They'll go over in a convoy together, accompanied by British warships. Write that down. If they're accompanied by British warships, then they've got a better opportunity of being safe. So let's say Mia's ships are now like as part of a convoy. The German subs are looking around and they're like, "Ooh, I see some merchant ships." They fire off maybe 1, 2, 3 torpedoes, and as soon as a big boom goes on, those Navy commanders, they know they're moving their ships in fast, and so you get a shot off if you're a U-boat commander, and then you dive down, and you hope that nobody's going to be sticking around too long. Got it? Yeah. Here's the thing. And we're going to see this when we get specifically to America and the other neutral countries. Germany starts doing this in the early stages of the war. The United States and others threaten to declare war on Germany. We'll see, and you've read this as well in your chapter, the Sussex Ultimatum, right? If you read the chapter, you know about this. Wilson is like, don't do that anymore. Germany's like, okay. And then the United States is trading more and more with Britain and France, and the Germans are like, we're going to lose this war because we can't keep up with the supplies that are coming in from all these places to Britain and France. So they resume submarine warfare. And what does the United States do? Declares war on Germany. And then we start sending more and more troops and supplies and everything, and the Germans are like, okay, forget it, that's it, we're done with this. You got that? Do you see how the dynamics work there? Okay. Particular battles. Write this down. I'm going to talk about several different battles. These are some of the big battles. Battle of Tannenberg. Write this one down. It's in your handout as far as the different tactics and so forth. This is what we're going to learn from the Battle of Tannenberg. This is from August of 1914. It's on the Eastern Front. August of 1914, the Battle of Tannenberg. It's in your handout. It's on your handout, yep. Okay? So the Battle of Tannenberg is Germany and Russia. And it gives you a little bit of an insight as to how things are ultimately going to play out between Germany and Russia. Russia's got a lot of troops. So does Germany. Which have better weaponry? Germany to a degree. And which has better communication apparatus? Germany. Okay? Here's a problem that pops up in the Battle of Tannenberg. Two Russian armies operating separate from each other, not communicating well, not coordinating well. And you have to have communication systems that allow you to communicate quickly as the battle is taking place. So that if you see an advantage, you're like, message to the other command. I mean, eventually you're going to have like radio and so forth. Their communication was too primitive, and ultimately the Germans will have the advantage. Write it down. Battle of Tannenberg, big victory for Germany, mostly because lack of effective modern communication between Russian generals. Okay? And the Russians are tough. I mean, they're going to slog it out for several years here. They're going to give it their best. And then they'll go down fighting and ultimately end up with a communist state. Okay? Bummer. Got it? Battle of Tannenberg. Okay? Battle of the Marne. This is the first of several battles I'll identify on the Western Front. This is the first one. This is where Germany comes charging through Belgium, right? The Schlieffen Plan. And they're moving, they're making their way to Paris. But eventually, the French are able to stop them. The French hold them up. And so the Germans pause. And the French are able to dig trenches. And the Germans on their side, what do? Dig trenches. And so these trenches that they build at the end of the Battle of the Marne, those are going to be pretty much used throughout World War I. You'll be in your trenches, in your defense, and the other side will be like, let's attack! Woo! And we know how attacks generally work on the Western Front. They tend to fail. Yeah. So the Battle of the Marne, one of the early battles in World War I, the first one and the last one that you'll see fluid movement of troops, okay, before things settle into a stalemate. This one, Battle of Gallipoli, I've intimated this one before. This is where the British decide they're going to try and hit Turkey and break Turkey and therefore be able to provide some relief up through the Black Sea to Russia. The challenge, they need to make amphibious landings on Turkish soil. And an amphibious landing has your troops landing at sea level. And where are the Turkish defenses? Above that. And they're firing down on British troops and, make sure you write this down as well, Australia and New Zealand troops. Which is why Australia and New Zealand end up with some of the highest casualty rates per soldier group, because their troops are making this ultimately foiled attack. Just as a personal note, this is a British operation, and it is headed up primarily by the Navy, among others. And the head of the Navy at that time is Winston Churchill. And so this is not going to do very well for his career. Winston Churchill, in the head of the British Navy at the time in World War I. It's going to kind of mess it up for him. But he will make a comeback and be the successful Prime Minister of Britain during World War II. These next ones I'm going to go through fairly quickly. 1916, the French and the Germans, the Battle of Verdun. Tens of thousands of of French and German soldiers killed along the Battle of Verdun. Give you this and I'll be moving along. 2.5 million involved in the fighting. 156,000 French killed. 143,000 Germans killed. Was there much movement ultimately? No, not much movement. Battle of the Somme, great example of a German versus British battle. So this is going to be over closer to United Kingdom on the British sectors. You'll have similar casualties, similar destruction and death. Outcome, no real movement. Toward the end of the war, 1918, this is the last one I'm going to show you here, the battles of Chateau-Thierry and Meuse-Argonne. You do see a little bit of a movement here, but still not much. I mean, it's a lot more than had taken place before. This one is the United States troops, having recently arrived into France. They're trying to push through to Germany and experience lots of casualties as well. Yep, that's right. Yep, that's the one. And there'll actually be some big battles there during World War II as well. Yes. Yes? From World War I?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually a really good game. And there was armored trains in that game. I don't know if that was like an actual thing in World War I.
Yes, it could have. Yes, it could have been. Yep. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and post. These are hilarious. And we don't have time to do those. I think I'll post those ones. If World War I was a bar fight, watch that. They're very, very clever. Trying to intimate that the war was like a bar fight. And who gets punched first? Belgium is standing around doing nothing. Anyway, it's crazy. It's fun. And yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to forced conscription next time. Wipe your desks down. Sorry. Go as soon as you wipe your desk down, head on out, because you don't want to be light.